Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel, LAX over here. In today's video, we're going to be talking about how to train for strength and for size. Basically address here is that we need to understand that there's actually differences when it comes to training for strength versus training for size. Yes, there are some similarities, but they also have their distinct differences between each other. So when I first started training at the age of 13, I assumed that by gaining more muscle, I would get stronger, and that is true to an extent. However, as you become more experienced in the gym, you're going to start hitting strength plateaus if you approach training from a purely muscle building perspective. So when it comes to training for strength, having muscle is definitely important. However, for me personally speaking, it's the least of my concerns if I'm purely chasing strength goals. So in my opinion, there are three main things that you really need to focus on when it comes to developing strength purely. And that's basically your tendons and your ligaments, your central nervous system, and basically how you actually go about programming your sets, your reps, and your rest times when it comes to training for strength. Let's expand on these a little bit further. So the first component is basically your tendons and your ligaments. And what we need to understand when it comes to strength training is that what's really moving the weight from point A to point B is more so your tendons and your ligaments and not so much your muscle. Yes, your muscle is important. However, the real true strength development comes in your tendons and your ligaments. Now, there is one issue when it comes to that. Tendons and ligaments take longer to recover and regenerate fully compared to muscular tissue. I believe tendons and ligaments have a 4 to 6 month lag time behind muscular tissue. Now, the second component is our central nervous system. The central nervous system in a nutshell is basically composed of our brain and our spinal cord, and essentially what this system does is that it takes neurological messages from our brain and it sends it down to our muscles and when we're executing certain type of actions or movements. So for example, the best way I like to explain the central nervous system to somebody who's new to the concept is that whenever you're riding a bike or you're driving a car and you're not necessarily consciously thinking about what you're doing, you're just kind of doing an autopilot, that's basically your central nervous system at play here. Now, the reason why I'm mentioning this when it comes to weight training is because your ability to efficiently move a weight from point A to point B is going to determine how successful you are in executing that lift. And when we train for strength, our central nervous system is going to be fatigued quite frequently, and that's where we need to ensure that on days that we're actually pushing our strength limits, that our central nervous system is fully recovered for that day. I want to make a separate video in terms of how to take deloads, how to take some time off the gym so it actually benefits you as opposed to just training weeks on end. But that'll be a whole separate another video. Now, and then for the last part is basically understanding that our reps and our sets and our rest times for strength training is actually different compared to training for size. So when you're basically designing a strength protocol, when it comes to sets, reps, and rest times for strength training, is that we need to understand this. Since we're using such a sheer amount of weight, we can't do many repetitions with it. Usually speaking, strength repetitions range between 1 to 5 at most. So one way we can make up for this lack of volume is basically increasing a lot of sets. So with strength training, you could do sets of 8, sets of 12. I've seen even sets of 15. But you're not doing many repetitions. You're doing maybe 1 to 5 at most here per set. And then the other component is actually our rest times between sets. When you're lifting a lot of weight, guys, you need to realize that you're going to need a lot of time to recover between sets to ensure that you're fully recovered enough to move a certain amount of weight. Because once you're training past 80% of what your 1 rep max is, it's going to take your body time to recover between sets to ensure that you're able to successfully execute that lift. Now, tying all this to training for size, when it comes to training for size, which is basically just increasing our muscular tissue, the name of the game there is purely time under tension, aka hypertrophy training. And what that basically is that a muscular development occurs best when basically we're able to inflict the most amount of damage on our muscular fibers over a period of time. And this is done through peak contractions and basically overall time under tension of the muscle. So when it comes to training for size, for example, we can do a lot of repetitions, but we can't do too much weight. But on the flip side, we don't need as much rest between sets because we're not using crazy amount of weight here. Another way to kind of think about training for size compared to training for strength is that usually when you're training for size, you're looking at more so kind of isolation exercises, as opposed to strength training, you're looking at more so compound exercises. Compound exercise basically being that you're using 2 or more major muscle groups, such as your bench, your squat, your deadlift, your overhead press, and your other type of Olympic movements. But I'll make a separate video in terms of getting into more detail of each individual compound exercise. So one question I get asked a lot, guys, is are you able to train for size and strength at the same time? And my short answer to that is yes. However, you need to basically plan your training accordingly. There's going to be some days where you're training purely for size, and there'll be some days where you're purely training for strength. I've made the mistake before where I try to do strength workouts and bodybuilding workouts, aka size training, in the same session, and I found that to not be very effective for me. But I'll make a separate video in terms of how to actually how to program days for training for size, and how to train other days, how to basically train for strength. So I hope that basically clears up the differences between training for strength versus training for size, guys. The second portion of this video is going to basically be hitting a 500-pound PR on the deadlift. This is an exciting video for me, guys, because I've been chasing 500 pounds for the last year and a half. Just to give you guys some context, I severely injured my back twice doing deadlifts. Back when I was around 19 and 20, I'm 23 now. So I've been injured and sidelined for the last 2 years. However, now I'm fully healed and I'm fully recovered. And I spent a lot of time in terms of actually studying how to not get injured while simultaneously pushing my limits on a weekly basis as the months kind of go on here. So let's get right into the video, guys.